Hey guys, Luke here with Wilson Auto Detailing, and in this video I want to share with you really how I've scaled my detailing business from zero many years ago to where we are now, and basically just to explain every part of that process in terms of like each, let's say, season of my detailing business. And I've never made a video like this where I'm going to get as specific as I'm going to get here. So this is probably really just if you're a professional, you're going to be interested in this, and if you're not, you're probably not going to be interested in this, okay? So let me jump right in. For those of you who don't know, I actually started my detailing business when I was 13, and the reason for that is because I was really interested in starting a business, and I had no idea what to do because as a 13-year-old, who starts a legitimate business? And I would not say that I actually started a legitimate business when I was 13, right? I was not a sole proprietor LLC. I wasn't any sort of legitimate business entity because I was 13 years old, right? But what I was doing is going to AutoZone with my dad and buying a bunch of stuff, including, Armor All, car soap, a shop vac that I didn't buy. The shop vac I had was actually really dirty, dusty, had duct tape around the mouth of it, and it was sitting in our basement for years, and that's what I used. And I actually pulled this radio flyer wagon around the neighborhood, and I would knock on doors with flyers that I printed out myself, okay? So I would do like 20, 30 flyers at a time, okay? And I would hand people my flyer, tell them who I was, and the only trick was, I remember my dad saying, hey, you have to make sure that you actually introduce yourself and talk to somebody. So don't just leave a flyer on the mailbox, don't leave a flyer at the door. You have to knock on the door, confront the dragon, right? You have to talk to them. And what's funny is when you're 13 and you're doing that, you kind of have the cute kid factor working for you. And so as much as you might not think, I actually got a fair amount of calls and phone calls and customers from that simple strategy, because I think people just liked the idea that there was this kid doing detailing. And at that time, I had no idea what I was doing. I remember I would basically be going through like 100 or 200 Q-tips every single time I would detail, because I would use Armor All, just original protectant, as my cleaner. And then I would use Q-tips to get into all of the, cracks, crevices, vents. I didn't even know what like a detailing brush was. And when I started, there was no like detailing on YouTube, so there was no online reference. And so that's how I started detailing. I literally would just take customers on the weekends, and then particularly during the week in the summertime when I was not in school. And that lasted from about 13 to 14 years old. There was like 2 years of doing that. And it was very minimal, right? Again, I would do like one customer on the weekend or several customers throughout the week in the neighborhoods that surrounded the neighborhood that I was in, because I could walk to them. And I want to share with you guys this quick story because it's something that kind of like imprinted in my head. And that is, I remember one summer when I was, again, before I was 14, I was walking with my wagon like around the sidewalks of the neighborhood. And I remember people at the neighborhood pool looking out at me walking around with this stuff and kind of like making fun of me. And I just say that to say, I remember at the time, it actually kind of like meant something to me. Like it just like hurt my feelings, right? Because you're a kid. And so I was sensitive, right? And some of them were my friends, and they just thought that it was like I looked dumb, right? And I probably did look dumb. But I just say that to say, looking back now at like kind of what I would call like probably the most humble beginnings you can have, right? Because you're pulling a wagon around a neighborhood. That was very much worth it, right? To just have that like small little moment of like getting made fun of, to have this kind of like lifetime, I guess now, of like, oh wow, I'm so glad I started so young and so early, because if I didn't, I would never be in the position I'm in today. Okay? And I think a lot of those people would probably give a lot to be in the position. So I don't mean that in an egotistical way, but I just mean getting started early is one of the biggest advantages to anybody. If you're watching this and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to start a detailing business because I'm so young. Being young is one of your biggest advantages just because you have more time than other people. And I think that's something that's hard to understand when you're young. But when you look back and you see the road that kind of like lies behind you, you realize, oh my gosh, like I didn't succeed necessarily because I was super smart or I was super talented. I succeeded because I started a lot earlier than other people, and I had a lot more margin to mess up, and it didn't matter. And that's actually what caused a lot of the success that I now get to experience in terms of detailing and what we do online. And so I just want to share with you kind of like this evolution. So that's kind of where I started. When I was 14, I saw the potential of my detailing business. Yes, even as a 14-year-old, I saw, like there are some basic business problems I'm running into here. And they were things like, number one, I can't drive. Number two, the products and tools that I'm using have limitations where I'm encountering problems and I don't know how to fix them, and I don't have YouTube or Google to like explain them to me. And so I actually had a family friend who had a detailing business who I went and I shadowed him. I basically showed up at his garage, and he no longer runs that detailing business, but at the time he did. And I basically shadowed him for a few weeks to figure out what the heck he used to to get around these problems I was experiencing, right? And that was one of the biggest learning kind of moments of my life, because the type of detailing business he had was one where they were trying to do a bunch of numbers. And so there were 10 cars, if not more, in and out of that shop per day. And they were working on a relatively low price point. And so they were looking for volume. And the reason why I say that was a really big learning experience for me is because, number one, it answered a lot of technical questions I had, which is like, how do I get around this type of stain? How do I get around this type of issue on the interior, exterior? But more than that, it showed me that I did not want to build that type of business. I didn't like the fact, as a young kid, right, just with common sense, I kind of deduced the fact that if I'm going to shoot for volume, I'm working on these thin margins. And the thought process I had was, we can put the same amount of input into a business like this and get more in terms of the output if we just leverage some things a little bit better. So that's the language I put to it now. Obviously, as a 14-year-old, I didn't have the language to say things like, we can leverage and get a little bit more output for our input. But now, looking back, that is kind of the thought process that led me to develop the business that developed over the ensuing years. And so again, to kind of move to the next season of this, after I kind of figured out some of these technical errors and how to get around them, I started detailing more and more and more. And actually, a lot of that had nothing to do with online anything. I wasn't online at that time, but I was doing a ton of word of mouth marketing, and particularly around the schools inside of the county that I lived in. So I grew up in Middle Tennessee, right outside of Nashville, and it's it's actually one of the most affluent counties in the nation. And so not that I grew up that way, but I'm just saying there was a lot of kind of money that congregated in this particular area. And so because of that, it was a great place to start a detailing business, right? Because there's plenty of disposable income. But what I did was I realized that my kind of strength in building my detailing business was my ability to talk to people, right? And to build relationships. And so I remember I went into freshman year of high school. This is many years ago now, right? Okay, I'm married. I have 3 kids. But I went into freshman year of high school, and I actually approached every single one of my teachers and told them about what I was doing. And I particularly remember my AP English teacher at the time said, she laughed at my price point when I told her what I was going to charge, because she was like, I had a guy at this other school that I used to teach at, because it was her first year there. She's like, I had a guy do it for $50. And I remember standing my ground. It was kind of one of the first times I was like, hey, I'm not going to do that. This is a minimum $120 job. I even remember that particular price point. And she did not become a customer, by the way. But my point is, that was kind of the next phase of my business, where I had figured out a lot of the technical stuff, and now it was time to market. And so I marketed in the best way I knew how, which is my network. And so what was interesting is, because I was, again, young, I was a high school student, and I actually did take this really seriously. And when I say I took it seriously, what I mean is I really foregone. I didn't do a bunch of sports in high school because I was focused on my business. And so I'm not saying that's good or bad or that anybody should follow suit. What I'm saying is that's just what I did. And that was the decision I made. So I was super involved in my business in high school and was really committed to growing that. And so I kind of forwent a lot of these other opportunities. Again, not good or bad, but looking back, I'm really glad that I did that, because it was kind of what I was supposed to do, right? It was just something I knew that I really wanted. And so I spent a lot of time word of mouth marketing. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I had many, many, many clients, and I'm talking 125 to 150 plus around just my suburb area. And these were people that I detailed for, generally speaking, after school or on the weekends, okay? Now, also by this time, I was starting to get my feet wet in building relationships with other detailers around the country to learn what they were doing in terms of product and tool implementations, okay? Now, at the same time as that was growing, I decided that I wanted to do some things online, because I was realizing the power of social media when I was in high school, and I was realizing the power of online, in terms of just online lead generation. So by the time I was a freshman in college, I had already had my first website built and established, and it's probably important to say that between about senior year of high school and freshman year of college, I spent a crazy amount of hours figuring out how to build my own website. I spent a crazy amount of hours learning how to build very rudimentary online search engine optimization techniques, strategies, all that sort of stuff. So I was implementing that so that by the time I was in college and I moved away from home, about an hour away from where I originally had built my business was already optimized for that particular city, and I became, literally weeks into my freshman year of college, I became the #1 rated detailer in terms of on Google and online in that new city, because I had implemented all of these things before I ever got there, and I already had a bunch of people who were willing to do things like leave reviews and contribute to how I was building up my online SEO presence, okay? Now, basically, the next problem I encountered in my detailing business was I realized, oh my gosh, I am making a ton of money as a freshman in college. Like, this is amazing. My business is cranking. I've developed my business where my products and tools and my strategy is getting this done relatively quickly. I've systematized a lot of things. And not only am I now generating leads online, but I have got this crazy word of mouth mechanism working for me because I've just been doing this for so long. So I was just I felt like I was winning from all angles. But the next issue, as you guys know, when you grow a business or when you're starting a business, you have problems. But when you grow a business, you create new problems, right, that have to be solved. And my next issue was this issue of recurring revenue. So when I was a freshman in college, there was a little bit online regarding detailing and mentorship and things like that. And I was seeing some of that. I still, again, was not online at all in any of this. But I was making, as a freshman in college, and I always kind of hesitate to say this because I don't know how revelatory to be, but as a freshman in college, I was grossing well over 6 figures in my detailing business, but I was taking home just about 6 figures as a freshman. That was just like literally money for me to save and to invest. And so I actually started investing when I was relatively young in terms of just really conservative market investments that I said, hey, I'm just going to build this over the long term. This will be healthy for my family when I start a family. And I was just super frugal. I was super conservative financially. I've always kind of been that way. Always, would rather save money than spend money, which can hurt you to a certain degree if you need to spend money. But again, I know I'm kind of rambling, but I'm just trying to give you guys kind of the full picture here because I've never really done a video where I just explained the process of what this was like. So when I was a freshman in college, again, I was making well over 6 figures in terms of my detailing business. That year was the first time I crossed that, actually. And so there was a bottleneck. There was a new bottleneck in my business, and that was the recurring revenue issue. And so I was experiencing customers coming back, and I was experiencing this huge influx of customers because of the word of mouth and online lead generation that I had built. But I had no mechanism, and I realized this. I had some great business mentors that really helped highlight some of this too. I realized I had no mechanism in terms of onboarding customers and keeping them in my ecosystem to create more lifetime value from that customer. If I detail for somebody once for $200, the average lifetime value of my customer is $200. But if I detail for them annually for $200, then all of a sudden I've immediately increased my lifetime value of my detailing customers to $200 annually. And now I just have to expand the time horizon to say how much this person is actually worth to the business. And so I started thinking in terms of how do I build enterprise value into my business? How do I start to scale in terms of somebody might be interested in buying this business? Can it be more than somebody just buying a book of business or a book of, or some sort of online lead generator? Can it be more intense than that? And so I started saying, how can I build a maintenance client system? And there was when I say there was nothing online about this, there was no resources about this. I mean, this was tried and true, just learn from your own mistakes, your own trial and error. No one taught me this. No, I didn't I think I was probably one of the few people, or maybe the only person at the time, when I did start on YouTube talking about maintenance clients, because this wasn't an idea I got from anybody else. This was just an idea that I had created in my detailing business. And now I have years and years and years of videos to prove that, right? And so that's part of why I'm glad I started making videos relatively early, because now I've got all this documentation to show hey, I actually did this. This wasn't, I don't talk about things that I don't understand, and I don't talk about things that I haven't done. And so I actually did this. This actually happened. Here's 500 videos to prove it. Here's a new customer's car in every single video. And so what I found was, I can create a maintenance client list relatively easily if I expand the time horizon that I'm asking somebody to commit to. So what I'm saying is the next season of my business looked like me bringing in clients and then getting them to commit to an annual subscription. And I didn't word it like that, but the reason I say annual subscription is because if this person paid $350 for their detail, what I had them commit to and what I had them schedule very far out was a $350 detail annually. And so this was and this is probably helpful for you guys who are trying to build this. This was one of the easiest ways to build my maintenance client list early on. I intuitively thought, hey, it's going to be kind of hard to get people, at least at this point in my business, to commit to like 4 details a year or 10 details a year or once every 2 weeks. But what I can get basically anyone to commit to with the right like tactics in terms of just like how I communicate it is I can get somebody to commit to an annual detail because like that's very low barrier of entry, it's very inexpensive, and people intuitively understand the value of it, so it doesn't require a lot of sales or persuasion, right? And so that's what I did. I actually started building up this list of annual maintenance clients of people who were like, oh yeah, call me next May and we'll schedule for next June, like no problem, but tentatively put me on the calendar now and then we'll get in touch later. And so it was this awesome thing where I didn't need 1,000 maintenance clients. What I needed, technically speaking, is 365 maintenance clients to have at minimum 1 client per day every single year with a certain, now of course I had a certain drop-off rate, I had a certain churn rate, and I had a certain like a rate of acquisition as well, but that's kind of beside the point. I'm trying to make this a little bit simpler. And so I started my maintenance clients by building an annual list of clients who I solved them annually. And it was a very, very profitable part of my business because it guaranteed revenue for literally a year into the future. And so everything that I was creating now could be created as a sort of like gravy train or like icing on the cake. And that became the foundation. And so my new onboarding or my new inbound in terms of leads coming in was literally like, it was like 100% profit, like it basically at no cost. And so this is how I began to scale. Now, the next phase of my business as I started to do this was I realized, I can go get more maintenance clients if I am more available to optimize my stuff online. And by the way, guys, like I'm still, at this point, I was still not doing basically anything on social media, okay? I was not doing anything on social media. What I'm talking about is I was learning how to build reputation online through platforms like Google, and we were running ads, and I was learning how to run ads on my own, not even on Facebook. This was pretty much all on Google, okay? So at this point, I was like, I can bring on some seasonal employees and or full-time employees, depending on how the person performs, and then it'll free up some of my time to go build more of a maintenance client list because I can continue to push authority into this thing that's particularly online, that's bringing in my leads. And I had a very simple math equation dialed in where I was like, for every X amount of leads that comes in, X amount of details get scheduled, X amount of details get done, and then X amount of those detailing customers become maintenance clients. And it just became an input-output machine that I just had to do the math and say, okay, now I just need to bring employees in. And so what I did, again, because I had a bunch of maintenance clients that was pretty straightforward in terms of like the details that were being done, I brought in basically 2 people at a time. And this first began seasonally, okay? So I've never shown like any employees on social media. And that's because now in my detailing business, I don't have any employees. And I'll explain the reason for that later. But I would bring in basically 2 people at a time, and I actually had 2 guys that were fantastic for a long time because they were also best friends, and it was a really good relationship for a couple of years. But my point is, I basically handed off the easiest clients to them, and that immediately freed me up to start building more of an onboarding process for what we were doing online, bringing in leads. This was still, again, not social media, it was just local customers building my detailing business, okay? Okay, that being said, brought those people in, and what ended up being best for me at the time was to bring them in seasonally. So those people would filter in and out of my detailing business seasonally, and I paid them as subcontractors because they were not full-time W-2 employees. And that they seasonally filtered in and out, basically summer, fall, spring. I did not have anybody in the wintertime because the wintertime ended up being a time where I just detailed for my maintenance clients and I basically took no new customers, and I would build, again, my online mechanism because then when summertime, spring, and fall rolled around, I was bringing in bank because I had spent all this time building and building and building and building. So when the season hit, it was just bananas. And again, it was basically all profit because I'd built my business with basically no cost. Like the cost was my time and the cost was my products, but I had kept, like I said, I tend to be very conservative and very frugal, financially, and so I'd built my business just really shoestring. And this is a good lesson for you, any of you guys who are listening to this. Like, it sounds cool on social media to be like, "Hey, I'm doing $1 million a year in my detailing business." Like, I work with detailing businesses every single day. I promise you, I was bringing in significantly. I mean to say this like humbly, but like significantly more profit, meaning money in my pocket post-tax, than any of these guys were who were doing $1 million, $2 million, and $3 million a year. And it was because of the structure I'd built around the business, okay? And it was really not sexy, and it was really boring, but it paid really, really well. And it continues to pay really, really well. And that's kind of why I want to share this with you, because I think sometimes on social media, it's just like, oh man, this guy's doing $1 million. You're like, yeah, what does that mean? There's a lot of other factors that come into that, right? How much time is he spending? Is it scalable? Is he building some enterprise value? Is he ever going to be able to sell his book of business? Does he have an onboarding process? Is he looking to go anywhere else? Anyway, okay, so enough of that. After I had brought in employees seasonally, and I had about, at the tops, I would have 4 people at any given time that were filtered in at the same time. And these people were taking care of my details. When I was doing that, it freed me up. And by the way, this was about my, let's call this my sophomore year of college, potentially. I was pre-med in college, so I was double majoring in biology and chemistry. And I was also building the business at the same time. And so I was very, very, very busy, and it was very hard to keep up with everything. So it was really nice to have those 4 subcontractors, as again, I paid them just with 1099s, to kind of take a lot of my maintenance clients away. Well, because I was majoring and I thought I was going to go to med school, I was trying to figure out, can I replicate some of my income in my detailing business online a little bit more passively so that I can study more. That was my original plan. And so all I started to do was say, hey, let's just see if there's a market for this. Let me just take a camera with me as I start to detail and literally just like show people what I'm doing, right? Like I think like there's probably other young guys who like are hard workers and want to like do this and might relate to this. So that's all I did. I just I remember I bought a $2,000 camera and I was like, dang, okay, I'm going to really buy a $2,000 camera. That's super expensive, but I'm doing it. And I bought a microphone and I was like, okay, let me just take this along with me. I started with my iPhone, actually. You can go back to my earliest YouTube videos and see that. And I literally just started filming my stuff. And there was no intention other than like teaching, like, here's what I'm doing. Like, I'm just like showing it like, hey, here's what's going on. Like, here's how I built this. Like, here's my detailing business. This is this type of customer. I even interviewed customers in the early days where I was like, hey, can I like just show you, like just to show people that you're real? And they said, yes. It was awesome. And that inevitably started to grow because part of it was just that there wasn't a lot of people doing it. And the other part, I think, is that people really resonated with like the fact that it was really happening. Like, I think people got really jaded really early in the online world where they were just like, there's so many fakes. There's so much fake stuff. And so the fact that I was taking a camera, showing all the details, showing the customers, people were like, wow, this is like super real, super cool. And so as that began to grow, and this is like beside the point, but later on in college, I decided I didn't want to be a doctor. I had a lot of friends who were doctors and kind of talked to them about what I was doing. And they were all kind of like, Luke, every time we talk to you, it feels like you really love being an entrepreneur, but you're just like, you think you want to do medicine, but it doesn't sound like you do. And that was very true. I was like, oh my gosh, I love entrepreneurship. I love building businesses. I don't really love medicine. And so that was a big shift for me because what it allowed me to do was say, oh, I'm going to divert all of my attention to my business. And so in college, I had this big shift where it was like, wow, I'm going to divert all of my attention to my business. And I was already succeeding, a lot. And so I was like, wow, if I take my leftover focus that I now have and put it back into the business, what's going to happen? And that's when I really got serious about YouTube and began to really do a lot of instruction and a lot of teaching, and particularly about business stuff as it related to detailing. Nothing else, right? I didn't say that I was, making $1 million a year. I didn't talk about buying yachts or Lamborghinis. Like, it was just like a very frugal approach to like, hey, this is what I'm doing, and here's why I'm doing it. And like, I know it's not sexy, but this is what this is like. And over the years, what that has now grown into, obviously, is me really wanting to build a kind of gold standard training business online. And so the latter half of that was full of, and I'll skip some of the details, but it was full of not just me continuing to grow my detailing business, not just me continuing to grow my maintenance list, but me continuing or beginning to grow and say, what do we want to do online and how do we want to do it? And learning what it took to, how do you build a team to build content online? How do you hire editors? How do you hire people? How do you hire agencies? What's the right relationship with an agency? What works best? What's too expensive? What's not expensive enough? What does it look like to work with people who have gone before me and done this before in certain niches and try to apply what they've done here? And so now really what I do and what I'm focused on is building training online for detailers in the detailing space and to build really kind of a third-party training gold standard platform for guys who want to actually start to make money and build their business and learn the technical skills that it's going to take to do that. And the reason why I'm really passionate about that is because that's what I actually did. And so you'll notice that I don't talk about like investing, on the channel, even though I started investing when I was 19. Like I don't talk about those things because in some sense I don't feel like I have the authority to talk on those things. And so the reason everything is so detailing focused is because like this is what I lived, breathed, and like woke up thinking about. And I've had those weeks where like where I remember before I got married and I was dating my wife, like I would work so hard during the day outside in 95-degree weather. I would come back to my house and I would get sick. I would literally have a fever into like the night until like 3 a.m. and my fever would break because I wasn't actually sick. I was just overheated. But I was in such hot weather for such a long period of time, working so hard, like doing manual labor, that I would literally have a fever into the night, and I remember taking Advil, hoping that it would break, and then waking up and doing it all over again. And so while no, I don't have to do that now, and I actually built my own studio, and I didn't, take any debt on it. Like I built it, literally just paid for it with cash and built it from the ground up. And again, that was just done from kind of these boring, like non-sexy things that build real businesses. And so guys, that's kind of like my journey of where I'm at now. And I know I'm skipping some details in terms of like maybe the last like 4 years. And part of that is because I'm 26 minutes into this video and I don't want to bore you too much. But hopefully maybe that like gives you some context of just like what it's been like the last 13 years of building a detailing business and bringing that somewhere. And so one of the other things that I would say is like I know a lot of detailers who have kind of like barely built a business or don't even have a business, and they're like trying to like talk about how to do that online. And I think one of the things that can be really helpful, or one of the frameworks that's helpful, is just like it's okay to just like document your process for where you're at, and that's literally what I did. And so I would encourage you guys to go back into my earliest YouTube videos, like literally filter them from least popular or from oldest to newest, because you'll see it was literally with my iPhone with like a headband in my hair at a customer's house with terrible audio, like trying to whisper so that I didn't make the customer feel awkward that I was like videoing at their house. But it's just all that documentation, like you have to actually do it, right? You have to go do it before you can talk about doing it. It's not going to land, right? And so that has kind of been the last, 15 years of my life, and part of why I love detailing so much and love talking about it so much. So guys, hopefully that was cool to maybe hear some step-by-step process there. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below or reach out to me at support@wilsonautodetailing.com. And guys, remember, as always, thank you for being involved. And remember, a great detailer is always learning. And I'll see you guys in the next video.